Iran's supreme leader is gone. The US-Israel strikes have reshaped the region. And most importantly, and what I've been hearing all day, is that Donald Trump dropped this bombshell, as he usually does, so to speak. It was a linguistic one this time. It's not Winston Churchill we're dealing with, referring to our sort of spineless prime minister that we found ourselves with in the United Kingdom. I'm very glad to be joined by Erol Morkoc from the Republicans overseas and Younes Sadaghiani. I always get this wrong. Okay, great. Iranian political commentator. I should know that. I've got some Iraqi heritage, so I should be using it in that part of the region. But thank you so much for joining us. I feel like I'm totally among experts tonight. Look, let's get into it with you first, Erol. What's going on? Was this military action by Trump inevitable? And how are people in America reacting to it?
I think it was absolutely inevitable, and it was something that he touched on during the campaign with very bellicose rhetoric in terms of bombing Iran. Now, we have to balance that, of course, with the fact that he's elected on no more wars, no foreign conflicts. And so I think it boils down to being very dovish on intervention with troops on the ground and very hawkish with tactical military strikes. And being able to balance that and the general dissatisfaction Americans across a lot of generations have had with the Iranian regime, it's playing well across the United States as far as we can tell, polling-wise.
We're looking at this from the outside, and I am seeing lots of bombs dropping on your sort of former homeland. Will this strengthen hardliners? I mean, does this kind of make this sort of war absolutely, in terms of the reform of it, impossible? How are people feeling on the ground there? What sense are you getting?
So every single Persian person I know, or at least 90% of the Persians overall, are celebrating this. So don't listen to CNN and BBC and Al Jazeera. People like Keir Starmer and the left-wing Marxist Islamists that somehow say this is an attack on the sovereignty of Iran. The Islamic Republic has been taking Iranians hostage for the last 47 years. And now we are getting freed. We are becoming rescued from 47 years of hostility and hostage taking by the Islamic Republic, not only the Iranian people, but the whole region. I think the future for the Middle East is very bright because Iran is the biggest instability force in the region. In terms of people on the ground, unfortunately, the internet is shut down now. So, we're not getting much information. But from the last videos I saw, people were screaming Bibi June, which means Bibi John, or like my dear Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu. So,
What a
Iranians
sight.
yeah. And, people celebrating in the streets, dancing and stuff. And I want to make one more point about this because a lot of commentators are making the comparison with Iraq and Afghanistan. I was saying, oh, look at that. Well, how much of a failure that was. But Iran's case is different. I agree. Iraq and Afghanistan was a huge mistake. You don't need to invade a country just to take out one person, which was at the time, what was his name? Bin Laden. And Saddam Hussein. You don't need to invade the whole country. So I understand they made a strategic mistake. But also, let's not forget that Iran is a different case. Iran used to have democracy. Iranians are not even Muslims. Iranians are asking for this. Afghanistan and Iraq never asked for that. So that is the false equivalence that some Western commentators are making between Iraq and Afghanistan and Iran. Iranian people are asking for this. They've been trying to overthrow the Islamic Republic, and they used to have democracy before. Before 1979, and even with Cyrus the Great. So we don't have any imported values in terms of democracy.
Yes, and we know that Bibi Netanyahu, called Trump Cyrus the Great in some ways, and there were those comparisons made. And I always try to tell people, this isn't an Afghanistan situation, or even a Pakistan situation where, they almost are driven into this level of Islamism. I mean, we're talking about a country that gave women the right to vote before Switzerland did. That's Iran for you. So it's quite crazy that they fell to the Ayatollah and that it existed for so long. I mean, Erol, look, from an American perspective, yes, people are jaded by Iraq. How is this conflict different?
Well, it's fundamentally different based on the people who are orchestrating it. Instead of having neocons, who, by the way, who designed a system to rob the American taxpayers, maybe not the neocons of the 70s and 80s that were fighting the Soviets and had some sort of semblance of a reasonability, but just look at the leadership. Look at the objectives. There's clean and clear objectives. Trump comes out and says, when we went to Iraq, what did we do? We fired the postal system. We fired the accounting division. We fired the head of the, public utilities. utilities. And what do you have? Complete chaos. So this is a controlled tactical group that has learned from the mistakes of the prior generation, the Rumsfelds, the Bushes, the Cheneys, who, by the way, who voted for Miss Kamala Harris in the last election. And I think we have finally somebody who's a very serious person who can look at the situation in a transactional way, which translates over there, and who's looking for results rather than perpetual warfare. And I think that's the biggest differentiation.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would, because they made a big mess with Iraq. And look, at the end of the day, they lied about Iraq. They said Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. No Iraqi was in the street protesting. And look, I know that Saddam Hussein was a dictator and he enslaved and he killed and tortured a lot of Iraqis. The Iraq situation, I think, was a revenge mission by George Bush Jr. on
Mm.
behalf of his father, George Bush Sr., because we couldn't do what he wanted to do during Kuwait. So I think that was, and the tactical mistake that they made is that they thought that they can spread democracy to countries that don't really want democracy or never have democracy. So you cannot spread democracy through bombs and bullets in countries like Afghanistan and Iraq. As I say, Iran is a different situation because we had the first Bill of Human Rights with Cyrus the Great 2,500 years ago that gave rights to the Jews. Then also under Reza Pahlavi, you used to have a democracy. So we're going back to it. We have a system that we can look back and say, okay, that was what Iran was like. For 47 years, had a occupying force occupying Iran. And now we're going to get rid of them and we're going to go back to that same system.
Well, it's a really good question. I want to go to you, Erol, about this. I mean, with Khomeini gone, I mean, we've seen all the internet memes of Marco Rubio being the new Ayatollah, Trump, Keir Starmer. So Keir Starmer, someone who still refuses to prescribe the Islamic Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization, which just baffles me. I mean, just down the road from me where I live, you've still got the embassy operating. It's just quite ridiculous how thin-skinned he is with the Islamists of this country. But who holds the power now? I mean, genuinely, what is going on? Because the person in charge now, I believe the interim president or prime minister, is saying he will seek revenge. So, in America's mind, who holds the power now, and what is the ideal for Donald Trump in this situation? Errol, we'll go to
So
you first.
the ideal for Donald Trump in this situation is to keep on cutting off the heads of the snakes as they emerge until we get down to a point where there is nobody left to want to take that job. And then the real power of Iran is in the Iranian people. And that's when they will come to the streets. That's when they can put forth, a leader. Now, I'm not saying the State Department doesn't have some people in mind, some names that have been mentioned, very famous people, but that doesn't mean that in an organic free market system of ideas, a better leader might emerge. And as the gentleman here has been talking about, Iranians have a long history of democracy and human rights. And so the ideal situation, the best situation is for that to come from an internal not rebellion, but finally after the enemies have been completely decimated, then they can make that choice for themselves. And if that goes south, then of course that requires a revisitation of the situation.
Right. And what would you say, Younes, is the sort of like the ideal situation right now? Because I agree. I think Trump is not interventionist in that way. I think he's just happy for them to not have nuclear weapons and stop attacking the rest of the Middle East and stop saying death to the West. And I feel like he wants to just leave them alone. Who is the ideal leader in your opinion? A lot of people are saying the royal family, the prince. I mean, I was just outside the embassy a couple of days ago speaking to people. A lot of the younger generation want that. But what in your mind is the ideal situation at this point?
Well, the ideal situation is for Shah Sadr Reza Pahlavi, the son of the previous king, to take over. However, he
Right.
said himself that he doesn't even want to run for office. He wants to lead the transition. So
And
the
he's in London
transition,
right now, isn't he?
I'm not sure. Maybe I
Right.
didn't know that. I didn't know.
Okay.
Maybe
Okay.
I haven't heard anything though. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. Anyway, so I think he's the leading figure. However, what we have to realize that back in the day, the Shah, one of the reasons why the Shah fell is because he was a king that was governing. A king shouldn't govern. A king should reign. So we need to have that separation of power, like what we do in this country, with the difference between Keir Starmer and King Charles. King
Right.
Charles is a symbolic figure for the country, whereas Keir Starmer is in charge of the governance. I think Shasta Reza Pahlavi understands that. And he realized that the reason why his father was vulnerable and then overthrown was because he was a king that was governing. So I think what should happen is that he should take charge of the transitional period. And then maybe we can have a referendum in 2 or 3 years' time and see whether we want a parliamentary system or whether we want a republic similar to the American system. I think probably Iranians, because of the history that we have, because we have history of thousands of years of kings and queens, I think people are going to opt for that option most likely. For also, we shouldn't forget that Donald Trump is non-interventionist, as you said. At this moment in time, he said that, Shasta Reza Pahlavi is a very nice guy, but he didn't quite endorse it. He didn't say no, but he didn't say yes. So he's
Yeah.
kind of been keeping him in limbo in a bit to see what will happen. But what I would like to say to Donald Trump, and I'm sure he knows this already, is that there's no reform in the Islamic Republic. So don't think that you're going to find someone within that regime that's going to come and do your job, because they're all rotten from the core. I think if you can manage to work with the Islamic Republic, you have no character, you're conscious. So I don't think you can find a good guy from those crowds. I think you need to find someone that's relatively clean, relatively detached from that system. And unfortunately, you can find that person from abroad, not inside the country.
Power is all corrupting, and I think it's such a job, that one. I mean, you've got access to so many
Mm.
resources, access to, so many different axes of power there. So it's definitely going to be a job that is prized. But I agree. I mean, if Donald Trump picks the person who ends up going there, I know about a list, a sort of non-hit list that's being spoken about, where they are protecting certain people at the moment from within the regime. But, that's all alleged at this point. I just want to get lastly into the sort of cracks that we're seeing within the Western alliance at the moment because of what is going on in the Middle East. Obviously, Keir Starmer has come out completely weak in this situation. He didn't initially allow the US to use certain bases. We know that after, I hate to even bring this up, but after the Gorton and Denton by-election, which was sort of won by the Greens Party, a very, very liberal party over here, it seems like he's almost been scared into pandering for a very Muslim vote. And he's basically trying to please everyone and he's pleasing nobody. So Starmer basically is on the very bad side of Trump. This sort of special relationship clearly doesn't exist anymore. And Trump's come out swinging and said he's no Churchill, which I firmly agree with. Errol, where has this come from? What's going on?
I think it's come from just the frustration, whether that be the Chagos Islands, which Trump tried to play ball a little bit until he realized just there's no competence here, there's no logic here. And then you start to realize, yes, we have a fractured system between our political leaders, but the Five Eyes, the military alliance, that part isn't fractured, regardless of if labor is going to hold back, certain access to bases or things like that. I would say, honestly, it's almost like shining a light on the cockroaches and seeing where they scatter and seeing which one of our friends are going to show up and which one of our friends perhaps need to have regime change at home. Because it certainly seems bizarre for the Western Alliance to be abandoning President Trump in this time of need when we need leadership, especially from Europe. Part of the problems in this region, many of them actually, originated with certain ideas and certain lines and certain political perceptions that came out of the old school European world. So why abrogate that responsibility? Why not join the Americans who are trying to set forth a path for not only proper intervention, but also financially? You saw President Trump calling out Spain
Yes.
being unwilling to be part of this alliance after all the Americans have done to protect NATO, and they don't even want to spend 2%. So this will be, a sad footnote, but not forgotten, and definitely something that will be addressed. And I think you saw the Germans and MERS coming in and saying, no, Spain needs to step up, and there might be some internal leadership. You see Macron launching that nuclear submarine today with all the fanfare and the Marseillaise. So things are turning as the wheels of time seem to be leaving Europe behind.
Totally. I mean, it is such a shame. Even Trump saying to Harry Cole from The Sun today, even if Starmer did help, we don't really need him. And it just shows how we have gone from those actually defending against the Nazis and leading the charge in World War II to a pretty insignificant power. I mean, is Keir Starmer a friend of the Iranians, Younes? I mean, really? I mean, I was outside the embassy. Everyone hates him. Everyone loves Trump. That seems to be the going rate for him.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I don't think the British have and never been Iranians' friends, Persia's friends. I think if you go back all the way to World War I, sort of tragedies that took place in Iran, and it was divided into a few different places. I think all roots back to the British, how they tried to steal our oil for a long time. And I think actually the revolution was caused by the British and the Americans, the left-leaning governments like President Carter and the British government. However, you have to realize that it's usually the left-wing governments that are weak and pathetic. I know that Nudge stands firmly with the Iranian people. He's come out and said a few times that he does. And, we need that kind of thing. I'm pretty sure but the problem we have with the politics in this country is that now we have the right divided into reform, conservatives, store, advance, and then we might go to the next election, and we might lose that election to the Green or Labour, which is a tragedy for this country. I think that Britain needs saving, and I think the last time, like next election, this country needs to be saved, okay? Because as you said, you just lost the by-election. Reform lost the by-election to the Green Party, which are a joke of a party. They are pro-Hamas, pro-Islamist, just absolute nonsense policies, and you have the Muslim bloc voting with the Greens just to get power. And you need to stop that. And as you said, Keir Starmer is weak and pathetic. But at the end of the day, let's be honest about it. It's the sins that this country committed in the past that's now coming and back. And I hope they can turn this, because if United Kingdom falls, Europe falls, and it's already been falling, I really feel sorry for Europe. And I think if this continent falls, it's going to be a very sad day for humanity.
I totally agree, and I think this
Yeah.
is really, I mean, the sort of the tide has come out, and I think Europe's been left naked in this situation.
Yeah.
And it's really, really revealing. I almost feel like when you need a strong man in power, Europe doesn't have any at the moment, and we're totally being shown up. Erol, I know you've got to go, and Younes, you're a very, very busy guy, but can we just finish on what is the biggest risk that you think no one is talking about here? Because I feel like we're kind of in the middle of it at the moment. What do you kind of see in the future being the biggest risk globally? Erol, I'll go with you.
I would say the biggest risk would be if over the next 12 to 24 months, Iran breaks into factions, and then you have, Turkey looking at invading the north. You have Iraq potentially looking again. Who knows what Pakistan's up to? There's a lot of people who could get their fingers in there if nothing comes around, or if it balkanizes into a Syrian type situation. Now, I don't think that would happen, but that is perhaps something that people are overlooking, because it's only a couple tinderbox moments that can occur to push a society backwards, and then that would be a disaster for us.
Younes, would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, to some extent, yeah, that is one of the risks. And that's why, separatists, we want to keep Iran under one faction. Because, there is many different ethnicities in Iran. There's Turks, there's Kurds, there is Lurs, there is Faluj, there's Persians. There's so many. We can be split into 5 or 6 different parts. So we don't want that to happen under any circumstances. And that's why, uniting behind a common leader like Pahlavi is very important, as that figurehead, as a cultural figurehead for the country. But then, however, the other risk is that, in Pakistan, they attacked the US embassy, and in Iraq, they attacked the US embassy. And I'm like, what's that got to do with you guys? Iranians are celebrating inside Iran, inside and outside Iran. Iranians are happy, at least 90% of them are. And then you are attacking US embassies on our behalf. And I think the bigger problem, sort of the long-term problem that we need to tackle, is this Islamist mindset, Islamist/neo-Marxist mindset that sees America and Israel as an imperialist sort of, so many people message me, oh, Israel wants your land. I'm like, Israel is like thousands of miles away from Iran. I don't think Israel can access Iranian land. They don't want our land. Like, what's a nonsense thing to say? So I think, and I go back to the first point I made in this, it's going to be, look, when Iran is split, yeah, it's going to be an economic opportunity for Israel. It's going to be an economic opportunity for USA. Why not? Look at UAE. We can sell our oil to them. We can get them to invest in our country. Why is that a bad thing? Why is being part of the global community a bad thing? Why, because a lot of people say this, the Islamic Republic is fighting Iranian sovereignty. No, they're not. They're the occupying force. Islamic Republic is the occupying force. Israel and America are freeing us. So let's hope we're free from this tyrannical regime so we can be part of the international community once and for all. It will help stabilize the Middle East. It will decrease radicalization and Islamization in the Middle East and by extension in Europe. I think it's in Britain's benefit. It's in Europe's benefit. A lot of these Islamist extremists that you have in your countries, even some of the funding to your universities that is sort of radicalizing the students, is coming from the Islamic Republic.
Yeah.
So once the Islamic Republic falls, I'm telling you, 80-90% of your problems will be solved.
And Trump knows that, and the hardline politicians understand. Honestly, couldn't have put it better myself. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. That's Erol Morkoc from Republicans Overseas and Younes Sadaghiani, Iranian politician and Iranian politician, maybe in the future, Iranian and political commentator. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.